Hello, fellow travelers. Welcome to the first of many conversations for those on the path to sacred leadership. What I want to talk about is the role of radical trust in accelerating our evolution and deepening our conversation with the divine. For me, trust is my most sacred form of service. And what do I mean by radical trust? To me, trust the universe is a foundational principle, though I didn't fully understand its sacred character. But it starts from an awareness that there is an intelligence that we're all connected to, and that this is a benevolent force that serves our highest good and our evolution. And whether we know it or not, we're all engaged in a sacred conversation with this divine intelligence. And when we meet that invitation through trust, that's an act of faith. That's how we say yes to the divine, how we act on the invitation to move past fear and perceived obstacles and what our ego selves can understand or know, and enter the unknown, the place beyond the known, where the zone of miracles and transformation begins. And that's where the impossible becomes possible, and where innovation and creative inspiration are fully optimized. So when we begin to engage radical trust as a foundational practice and see that as a sacrament, we come to understand that this is why we're all here, to evolve, to go past what is known or believed to be possible, and to expand the field of possibility for all beings. And this is particularly important for leaders who must leverage and access visionary intuition to move us all forward at scale. So to break this down, we are all in conversation with the infinite. Whether we know it or not, we're all sending and receiving information energetically at all times. We're connecting, all of us, to a common source. We're all energetic beings, and we transmit and receive thousands of signals and information every second, all beyond our realm of comprehension. And this conversation is with a much deeper, more powerful source than any one of us. And you can refer to that as the infinite or the universe or God, whatever works for you. But the best evidence that this is outside of our human selves is something you can draw from your own lived experience. If you think about a time in your life when you received a flash of intuition, or received a call to action, or knew something was going to happen before it happened, or thought about someone you hadn't thought about in years, and then they called you minutes later. These are the moments that the universe is calling out to you. And in my past experience, for me, this began at a very early age. We all have access to this intelligence, but particularly in my professional life, and I've been a lawyer for the past almost 30 years, I found that very early on in my career, I would often feel in a room or during a debate like I was just impelled to speak. There was something rising up in me that led me to put positions out there, often very initially unpopular positions, but I felt moved by a force outside myself. Or I would have a very strong sense of the outcome of the situation. And it was in a positive form of what could be possible, although often something that at the time people didn't understand as being possible. And so I had a very strong drive to pursue courses of action and could visualize the sequence of events that would lead to a positive outcome. And I would act on these impulses from a deeper faith, but I didn't know why. I merely felt moved by a force outside myself and was compelled to move forward. And at times, this call would ask for very radical change in my life. There was a time in my career when I was a young partner, and I had been working very, very hard for a different partner in the firm who was the source of a lot of work that was feeding a lot of the other partners. But I had gotten to a point where serving that individual and serving their work was not serving me. It was not enabling my growth and evolution. It was very limiting and demoralizing at the time. And I had this very strong sense, which I can still remember, that I needed to disconnect from that source of work, which was also a source of comfort because it meant an endless supply of work that validated my existence as a partner in the firm. But I just heard this voice that told me I needed to step back and be willing to take a bet on myself and trust that if I did that, something would appear. And that was a deeply uncomfortable moment because in not taking the next case that this individual could hand me, I had nothing to do for a while. And I had to sit with that discomfort and really trust that there was a reason that I was being asked to find stillness and to allow something to move into that space. And after a few months of this, I got the opportunity to pitch a very significant technology company for a very significant piece of business, which they then hired me for. And this led to a series of new clients and opportunities that very quickly led to my ability to develop a leading practice in the technology field. And that moment has always stood out to me as a turning point because I began to realize this is a conversation that when we act on the invitation, when we have the courage to meet that with trust, we are rewarded. Our evolution is served. And that led me ultimately to begin to look to the deeper spiritual meaning behind what is going on in these moments when we're moved to act or we receive this information from a source outside ourselves. So the first question is, where is all of this intuition coming from? There are three intelligences: the intelligence of logic, of emotion, and of intuition. And traditionally, we associate logic with the mind and emotion with the heart. And I would say intuition sits in the soul. And in Western culture and in my profession and in the field of technology and law in recent centuries, we have tended to dramatically over-privilege logic, and we underprivilege emotion and intuitive intelligence. We value in our mechanistic time what we can touch and feel and observe and see with our human senses, and we need to have it confirmed in a double-blind study before we accept that it's real. And this is a very unfortunate hierarchy because of all of these intelligences. Intuitive intelligence is by far the most powerful. And it's the one form of intelligence that our mechanistic theories can't explain. We can observe the neurons firing to begin to identify the neural pathways that lead to a logical course of events. We can replicate that in our computer coding. We can build computer logic. We can likewise start to measure the frequencies of emotion and the different amplitudes and energetic frequencies that are generated by different emotional states and see how these are working in this broader system of intelligence. But inspiration, intuition, this non-local field of information is beyond any human-built instrument. It's something that we simply cannot explain and that necessarily comes from a place outside of ourselves, because divine inspiration, creative intuition is by definition, something that leads to invention and art and innovation that is beyond what our human ego minds have ever seen or known. And that's when you're really entering that realm of visionary intelligence or divine intuition. And creative geniuses and philosophers and leaders and spiritual leaders throughout the ages have turned to that source to fuel human invention. So Nikola Tesla was someone who was frequently beset with visions, and Albert Einstein, Srinivasa Ramanujan, who was someone who had in India no mathematical training, grew up very poor, and received an absolute inspired download, which he attributes to divine intervention, of mathematical theorems and formulas that solved mathematical problems that were at that point thought to be impossible. And each of these individuals needed to trust these visions without any scientific evidence or any evidence of what was being presented to them. And so you begin to see that trust is a core engine of our evolution and of innovation, but it requires that you act beyond the known, and that you privilege and cultivate your connection to that source of infinite intelligence that exists outside of all of us. And that's why I refer to intuition, this divine intuition, as sacred. Sacred, the word, literally means connected to the divine source. And when we are open to and accessing that non-local intuition, we are in direct communication with God. We are accessing the intelligence of the universe. And this is available to all of us, and something that we can cultivate, which is something that will be the topic of a future discussion. But I can forecast that the heart plays a critical role here. And the heart is almost the Wi-Fi network that exists to establish the frequency where that intelligence can be accessed and met. And you engage high vibrational positive states to generate that frequency to connect with the infinite. Essentially, the heart opens the door. Likewise, fear shuts the door and prevents that information from being accessed or being able to be acted upon. But once that door is open, trust involves acting on the inspiration and the information that walks through that door. And for me, trust is a sacrament, literally a sacrament. A sacrament is a ritual that imparts divine grace. And trust is how we act on the invitation from the universe, how we say yes to God. And it requires an act of courage and an act of deep faith. It is activated when the circumstances are uncomfortable or uncertain. You don't need trust when everything's going great or when it's obvious what you should do. It doesn't take trust to know that you should, cash a check for $1 million or take a job opportunity that's immediately attractive on its face. Trust comes into play when you're being asked to do something that's deeply uncomfortable, that takes you into the unknown, and it evokes images of sort of Abraham, the father of faith for many religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, who was asked to leave all comforts and to act, on faith in response to information from God. And likewise, the Sumerian goddess Inanna had to abandon all that she knew, her clothing, her symbols, her wealth, in order to descend into the underworld in an effort to rescue her sister. And this involved deep faith, which is the engine of trust. Trust is an act of humility, and it's an act of service. Trust is not rooted in ego. The ego wants to protect you from criticism, from failure, from sticking your neck out. Ego wants you to not advocate in a room full of people for the path that everyone believes is impossible, to not put an idea out there that will be met with criticism and skepticism. That's where the ego wants you to be. That's the restricted state of fear and self-protection. But when you are able to move past that and accept a call to service and free fall into trust and to fearlessly follow the uncomfortable path that nobody may be ready for, or the idea that nobody may want to hear in that moment, that is not about serving your ego. That is about serving all of us. And the rewards in that pursuit are spiritual. And that is where you begin to see trust as this sacrament, the portal to divine grace. And it is only through trust that we can receive divine inspiration, that we can receive the gifts and miracles that are our birthright, that are part of our evolution and consciousness, that push us past the limits of our present experience so that we can evolve. And as part of trust, it's important to know, and this has been reinforced in my own lived experience, that the universe has your back. It is benevolent. As Ricky Jane Addams, one of my teachers and the founder of the Institute for Intuitive Intelligence, often says, we're each a divine piece of a benevolent universe that is always working on our behalf. And it has always been the case, without fail, that when I have trusted the intuition that I'm called to follow, it has led me to a place of growth and evolution. And there has never been an exception to that rule. So when you can begin to bring that understanding into your present awareness, you begin to live in an open channel of information and intuition and inspiration, and to understand that whatever you're experiencing in that moment serves your evolution, however uncomfortable. And although we don't do this for ego, and we aren't in a place of ego when we take that step and are willing to trust, this does and often can lead to what feels like miracles. Every time I've imagined and envisioned something that feels impossible and had the courage to trust that impulse, that has been realized. And when you begin to deliver on visions that seemed impossible, you quickly can be inflated because you're achieving outcomes that seem miraculous, and those around you will want to idolize and build you up. And just understand that this isn't about you, and it's not you. You are in active partnership with the universe, and you need the confirmation of these outcomes to deepen the trust and to deepen and accelerate that conversation. And don't worry, you're going to be presented with countless opportunities for humility, because just like a video game, once you've achieved all the lessons and learnings of one level, you're propelled into the next level, and there's a new set of challenges, and you are given higher and higher order missions in service of this constant conversation around humility, trust, and divine grace. Radical trust as service connects you to the fact that whatever is happening, however uncomfortable, it serves your highest good. So when we are living and leading from this place of sacred trust, we are moving into a phase of superconscious intuition, visionary intuition. That means not just checking in when you need the answer to something, or when it's convenient. As Ricky Jane Adams says, God is not your bitch. This is not a pick up the phone and dial a friend when you need it. This is an active, lived conversation. And when we are cultivating that conversation and privileging the information we receive and engaging in the sacrament of trust, we are opening the door to the intelligence of the universe. And we are exhibiting a faith and courage to follow that path, even if it goes against all reason. And so I invite you to act fearlessly and without ego by saying yes when you are called to do so, and to integrate this conversation into every aspect of our lives, because all that we do is sacred and presents the opportunity for evolution. And in this place of superconscious intuition, you become an agent of consciousness. You become someone who is breaking through the barriers and limiting beliefs that restrict us. And that expands the field of consciousness and possibility for all beings, because we are all one. This is an incredible privilege, and we all have this opportunity and this responsibility. So in my current path, I have deepened my commitment to trust, to radical trust as sacred service, and committing to the path of going where that leads. And I can assure you that where it leads is absolutely glorious. So thank you for tuning into this. I look forward to more conversations where we can explore the path of the sacred leader, the role of trust, and how we cultivate and optimize this state for the benefit of all.